you have a rather skeptical view of the corporate media. How do you respond to, for example, Brian Stelter saying that he does not watch the ads airing on CNN, his network, and therefore he is not doing the bidding of those corporations? And I'm sure many of the journalists working in big corporate outlets would insist that they are there for the public good. Also at the BBC.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work quite like that. It's more a confluence of interest, really. For a start, journalists nowadays, if you want to be a journalist, it's not like the old days where you would leave school at 16 and get a job in a print works and work your way up. Nowadays, you really have to commit to going to an elite institution like Oxford University or Columbia Journalism School or wherever you are. There's alternatives all around the world. And you tend to have to pay large amounts of money to do these courses. And then that's not even you having a job. Now you have to do 6 months or a year in London or Washington, D.C. or New York or Tokyo or somewhere like that. Very expensive cities to live. And this really filters out people from sort of more modest socioeconomic backgrounds. A lot of the time, it's also who you know. If you've got a relative who works in these things, if you've got an influential friend that can maybe open doors for you. So again, we have a situation where journalists really are increasingly coming from a very small pool of the country. And while I'm sure that CNN journalists don't actually watch the advertisements and think, well, I can't talk about them, they do have years of experience and stuff that their supervisors, their managers, and their editors will look back on. And if you are seen to be rocking the boat or asking too many questions, you simply won't get that promotion. You won't have your contract renewed. And so what happens is the people who please their bosses, who are the owners of the company and the big advertisers, ultimately are the ones that will rise up the chain. And the people who are really questioning power, questioning authority, tend to be at least stagnated at wherever they are, or quite often actually just quietly jettisoned, because nowadays journalism is it's a very precarious profession. People don't have lifetime contracts. They're working, if lucky, if they're lucky, they're doing 6 months on a contract, or they're just pitching to various outlets. And so if you push a narrative or step on certain red lines, you're simply not going to be invited back into the halls of power. And so that's kind of how it works. So while journalists at the top of the corporate tree certainly don't think of themselves as propagandists, ultimately, if they did believe anything else, they probably would never have gotten to the point that they actually are at.
Noam Chomsky pursued this line of argument in that famous interview with BBC's Andrew Marr. And those people would probably also not end up being a target of the US government the way it has happened with Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning.
No, I mean, most journalists don't really work on particularly sensitive subjects, do they? They're writing about sport or local issues or what have you. But it does send a message to people working in the sort of more political fields that certain things will probably not be tolerated. And this sort of comes into a more sort of feeling that, you don't have to be told this, but you just think, oh, that person's not one of us. That person's, not to be trusted. And so these people get a sort of black mark against them without even really having people to explain it, really. It's just sort of like, maybe stay away from that person. And so I think a lot of people say that, this is going to have profound consequences for the media if Assange is indeed extradited. But, frankly, I'm not sure about that, because I think so few people at the New York Times or CNN or the BBC or whatever are actually challenging power that much to the point where that might happen to them. So frankly, I think this is much more worrying for people working in alternative media rather than for big corporations.